Every painter faces this problem. The color looks good when it's just paint on your palette, but it feels impossible to make it look right on the canvas. An object that's supposed to be white suddenly looks all gray or brown when you paint it. The key to this problem is simple, but not obvious. White isn't really white. Just like with photography, where white balance changes everything, painting white means balancing it. Let's have a look at this painting by Sorolla. It's called Niña. The dress of the child on the beach here should be the flattest part of the painting because it's just white fabric, right? Yet it is not painted with white at all. On some places it looks bright orange, purplish, rose, or muted green. If you zoom in, it's a giant mess. But if you step back, it's an atmosphere. It's sunlight that you can almost feel on your skin. And that's the power of what I call white balance in painting. Knowingly or not, painters use white balance all the time, like photographers, but in a totally different way. Before I realized this, I was always guessing and hoping for the best with disappointing results, but now I know better. I became a professional artist, and with years of experience, hundreds of tubes of white, I can tell you this: to paint a realistic white, you need to kill your white. Paradoxically, white is one of the paints that I consume the most, but I never use it untouched. A white subject is never just painted with pure titanium white, and the shadows aren't simply darkened with black. To paint a good white object, you need a wide variety of warm yellows, cool violets, pale blues, and reflected colors from all over the place. White balance is a fundamental camera setting that corrects the color inconsistencies. It ensures that objects that are supposed to be white in a scene, let's say lit by candlelight, can appear white and not yellow. The reason white balance is necessary in a camera is due to the light temperature, which is measured in Kelvin. And our eyes and brains are amazing at automatically adjusting for the color of the light around us. A white sheet of paper looks white whether you're under a candlelight or a cool-toned fluorescent light. A camera just records the light that it receives. Without white balance corrections, photos taken under a candlelight, for example, would look overly warm and orange, or to the contrary, it might have a very strong bluish tint. On a camera, it's pretty easy. White balance works by adding the opposite color to the image. If the light is too yellow, you add blue, and inversely. The goal of the camera setting is simply to make the white more white, so more neutral. For the painter, it's the other way around. A good painter tries to make the white, less neutral. That's the only way to create a good sense of atmosphere. This is how you go from painting with colors to painting with light. Let's take a moment to talk about the sponsor of this video, Meeden. This year, Meeden is celebrating their 10th anniversary and they're sharing the love with some incredible discounts. You know, I'm a big fan of their easels because they are sturdy, reliable, and the prices are always fantastic. But right now, for a limited time, they're even better. It's crazy. If you're looking for a great option for sketching on the go or painting outdoors, check out their classic French easel. It's perfect for plein air painting. And for those of you with a dedicated studio space, you have to check out their large H-frame studio easels. They are built for serious artists. Thank you Meeden for sponsoring this video. To learn about how it goes and to prove that this idea of white balance works even for painters but in a different way, we'll study from the greatest master of light, Sorolla. Joaquín Sorolla y Bastida, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, was a Spanish painter celebrated for his luminous impressionist portraits and mostly for his wonderful landscapes. And I personally consider him to be the undeniable goat of sunlight colors. Sorolla probably had a palette that was very rich but still manageable with lots of cadmiums of all types, yellow, orange and red, several versions of them apparently. Also some cobalts, violets, ochres, viridian, Prussian blue, ultramarine blue, chrome green and lead white. And from this, he wasn't chasing colors, he was chasing light. In Niña, there is barely any untouched white at all. The white dress contains anything but white. It's yellow where the sun hits directly. The folds are suggested with roses and yellows. On the shadow side of the dress, on front of the little girl, it's made with a light beige that's slightly darker than the other side, but still pretty light. Also with violets in the cool side of the shadows and subtle blues where the sea reflects. There is also a very interesting touch of a bright orange that serves to represent the transparency, where the light pierces through the fabric almost like a second skin, and it takes this kind of orange glowing hue. Also note the liberties that the artist took with realism to serve the purpose of representing this very warm, very pink, almost otherworldly atmosphere, but still very realistic. The seams here are painted with almost pure rose instead of just a darker version of the beige used in the rest of the dress. This is why this dress looks luminous instead of flat. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense when you're standing here, but when you step back, chromatically it works. Observe the simple beauty of this arm. It feels like it's been painted with a few strokes, and yet there is plenty of chromatic complexity. Here the gradient is remarkable. The top part of the arm is less tan. Observe the bluish tones on this side of the arm, even the kind of greenish tones in some areas. In a sunny exterior light like this one, there is a strong contrast between lights and shadows, not just in terms of values, but in terms of hue. The light part is shining with this orange hue that the sun low on the horizon brings, but above the sky is still blue, so there is still a lot of blue present in the atmosphere, even though we don't see the blue sky. Anything that's hidden from the direct sunlight is bathed in this bluish tone. This is why the shadows on a sunny day appear bluer than the rest, and in this case, because the atmosphere is slowly shifting towards something more orange and warm and red, then the blue slowly shifts towards something like a vibrant blue-purple. And Sorolla created it very simply by mixing the gray-blue hues of the water with some pink magenta hues of the accents. So he really created this impression that it's a sort of a purple, creating an almost radiant impression. Yet, chromatically, it's still realistic looking. And surely you could say, hey, I've been to a beach at sunset and it's not that purple at all. And you would be right, because you're always right, aren't you? What matters here for Sorolla is not to be super accurate in the hues, but to be accurate in the warm-cool opposition. The secret to making those brilliant orange and reds of a sunset pop is to use the complementary nature of the color and how it works. On the color wheel, blue is the complement to orange, and violet is the complement to yellow. And as a painter, you can play on the balance between those two opposites. This contrasts makes the warm colors in the focal point appear even more vivid and luminous. In this case, you can use blue or purple, anything from the cool side. They're kind of interchangeable, or maybe I should say they all function as representative of the cool side of the painting. So it's a fair game to use anything from this side and to make it opposite to something on this side. Color mixing is never a perfect science, so you always have some leeway you can play with the individual components that each color has. So the colors here are exaggerated, sure, but as long as the divide between the light and the cool side is respected, the painting will work visually. The light side being represented by only warm tones and the shadow side represented only by cool tones. And when I mean warm and cool, I mean mostly warmer and cooler than the rest. This is light logic, and it works even if you exaggerate, because it still respects the logic, the structure of how our vision works. So you can go ahead and exaggerate, push the colors to their limits, like Sorolla did, and it will still work because the light logic is respected. So how does color create an atmosphere? Beyond the subject and the composition, Sorolla uses color to create a sense of space. Look at the water. The closer waves are darker, richer with violet shadows. The further water shifts towards cooler and lighter tones with less contrasts. That's aerial perspective at work. Distances reduce contrast and saturates the tones with the blue of the atmosphere. If the tones of the atmosphere are more orange, then it's going to be saturated with more bluish orange. There is also the brilliance of the reflection on the surface of the sand. It's very specific here because the water is incredibly shallow, so it's not typical water reflection. It's like a super thin mirror just on top of the sand. So you have to understand that there is also a brown coloration that comes from the sand just underneath the very thin layer of water, and that it will affect the colors of the reflection of the little girl. To paint this reflection, Sorolla took all the colors that he had for the little girl and simply added a portion of brown, like the one that you see in the corner. Actually, it's the same thing for the sky, even though we don't see it here, but the sky is a lot bluer than that. And what we have here in the reflection is a mix of the light blue of the sky and the dark brown of the wet sand. This results in this very strange, very unique color. But of course, it's not a stiff formula because Sorolla keeps this very organic by sneaking in subtle warm tones like orange reflections, pink reflections, kind of dancing in the water. And that balance of cool atmosphere and warm accents give the scene its freshness. With wet on wet blending, Sorolla blends and layers his colors to mimic the transient atmospheric effects of a sunset. He uses the power of the a prima approach to create vibrant brushstrokes that mimic the way the sunlight scatters through the water. He also uses optical mixing here, as pioneered by the Impressionist movement and people like Claude Monet, placing small strokes of pure color side by side, not blending them, not mixing them, almost like the pure red, pure orange, pure pink. The viewer's eye then blends these colors mentally, which results in something very vibrant, luminous, and fresh. It's an effect that's a lot more lively than if the colors were pre-mixed on the palette, which in most cases would just result in something brown. For example, if you take this green and pink and orange side by side and you don't mix them, you get something extremely vibrant and it pops a lot. You really see the colors. But if you mix them all together, you get something very brown and kind of dull. You don't get the same results at all. And you see Sorolla using optical mixing in a lot of his paintings, just barely touching the colors, using them almost pure. So the final takeaway: beginners struggle with light colors and especially white because they only imagine white as being something just white as snow. But white can also be represented by a color. Sorolla shows us that white is always relative. It's balance, temperature, and context. A white is always nourished by all the colors that surround it. So next time you reach for white paint to paint a white object, think of Sorolla and ask yourself what flavor you can add to make it feel like light and make it fully a part of the context. Always try to play with the idea of white balance and always try to kill the neutrality of your white by adding little touches of color to bring more flavor to it.